Hello, welcome to week 6 of this course. This is the second week in which you're going to be working on your research paper. By now you should have an idea of what you'll be writing your research paper on, and you should have begun to gather information from the sources that you found in the library exploration last week. This week you'll learn about how to cite your sources properly in APA style, which is the style used at City Vision University. We'll go over the basic rules for citation and also demonstrate a range of tools, both software and web-based, that can make citations easier to create. Remember, even though doing citations is fairly tedious, citations are useful because they'll help others locate the original sources that you reference in your work. Also, some form of citation is necessary in order to avoid plagiarism when you're using the work of others in your writing in an academic context. We'll also be talking this week about another genre of writing that's sometimes done in college, though less frequently than the ones discussed so far. This is the narrative essay, sometimes called a personal narrative, although it doesn't have to be about yourself. It could be the story of someone else. Narrative essays are a less formal genre of writing than a research paper or some of the other genres that we've talked about to date. They don't require citations, and they're similar to fiction. They're similar to fiction in the sense that both a narrative essay and a work of fiction tell a story. But the difference between a work of fiction and a narrative essay is that a narrative essay tells a true story. We'll also be discussing how to make your writing memorable and powerful by improving your writing style. Style involves many things, but we'll be focusing here on a few key elements such as conciseness, flow of writing, sentence variety, which we talked about also in week 1 with the snow day exercise, and finally the use of vivid language. Make sure this week to read the sections of our textbook, The Elements of Style, which are stated to be read in the resources. The authors of The Elements of Style are masters of writing, particularly E.B. White, who's known for children's stories such as Charlotte's Web, although he also wrote stories in nonfiction for adults. Strunk and White's advice is not all there is to say about English usage and style, of course, but it gives you a great starting point, and it's stated in a way that's easy to remember. Their rule, omit needless words, which we quoted at the beginning of last week, is a great example. If you're interested, the essay Politics and the English Language, which was written by journalist and novelist George Orwell, is well worth reading too. We quoted it at the beginning of this week. You don't have to read it, of course, but it's linked after the quote. In it, George Orwell talks about how poor quality writing can be used to obscure thought and mislead people, and that's something we often see in our society today. So, there are 2 assignments that are due this week. First, you'll be submitting an outline of your research paper using the same guidelines as you did from the previous outline. Remember the advice that I gave to many of you on your outlines when I graded them just last week. Make sure to include both an introduction and a conclusion in your outline. Specifically state that you have an introduction paragraph and a conclusion paragraph. Give at least a little bit of detail on what's going to be in your introduction and conclusion paragraph as well. The old cliche here is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Obviously, to make your introduction and conclusion colorful and interesting, you'll want to do a little more than that, but that gives you a starting point for thinking about it. Just think about how a good preacher often will introduce the points of his sermon, and then he'll go through them and then wrap up with the points in a practical application. It's just a way to present things so that people will remember more clearly what you are talking about after kind of being led into your subject at the beginning. The writing a draft section in week 3 provides some helpful suggestions on what to include in a good introduction and conclusion to kind of go beyond just saying, here's my points, and at the end saying, here's my points again. Bear in mind, also, this is going to be a 10-page research essay, double space, so we talked about the 5-paragraph essay format in week 3, but your essay here is obviously going to be longer than 5 paragraphs. You'll likely need more than 3 supporting details or sections that you need to cover. Or if you did have 3 main points that you're making, you would need to develop them in more detail over more paragraphs than you did in either the 5-paragraph paper that you submitted in week 1 or the 5-page paper that you submitted in week 4. So you'll want to, in your outline, indicate how you're going to develop each of your points. One final tip about the outline: remember that the outline often just has a few key words for each of the items that are on it. It doesn't need to be written out in full sentences. That could actually be less helpful since it could limit your creativity. You want your outline to just be a rough map for your draft, not be a draft for yourself. You want it to be something you can flesh out later in more detail and feel the freedom to change to a certain extent. But it is helpful to have an outline of some kind because it gives you a guide and a starting point, so you're not just stuck staring at the screen and trying to flow with things. The second assignment that you'll complete this week is another writing workshop assignment, and as such it has 2 parts. In the first part, you'll be writing a narrative essay in which you tell a story about an event. This would be an event that happened either in your life or the life of someone else. And it'd be a story that you can actually tell you know enough about to tell. It's not like a process essay, like first this happened, then that happened or whatever, but think of it more as like writing down a story that you might be telling to a friend or something. But since it's a narrative essay and not a work of fiction, it should be a true story. As I stated earlier, it doesn't require citations or research, so just tell what you know happened. There's a great example of this style of writing in the course this week, and you can use that as a model. Make sure, of course, to choose a story that you're comfortable sharing with your classmates, since you'll be posting this to the forum. In the second part of this assignment, you'll offer feedback to 2 of your classmates according to the writing workshop guidelines. So in the writing workshop guidelines, as you've been doing before, you look at not the ideas so much as the writing itself and how the writing could be improved. Specifically here, you'll be evaluating and offering suggestions on the style of your writing, since that's one of the topic focuses for this week. That means you'll be looking at those things like conciseness, word choice, and just what's compelling about the writing. How does it draw you in? These things that we talk about with the author's voice. I should also note that even though you're only submitting the outline for your paper this week, you should probably start writing your first draft of it as well, since that draft will be due next week. This is particularly important since next week you'll be submitting it to your classmates for them to do a review according to the City Vision rubric for research papers. I'll be talking more about that review in the video for next week. Till then, happy writing. Thanks.